Hi everyone, so today I wanted to talk to you about the speed of recovery. And the speed of recovery is a question I get asked about very, very often. And here's a few factors that will help you predict the speed of recovery. I think we've covered this before, but I do think it's important to cover it again because I'm getting a lot of questions. So, the first factor in determining how fast you will recover is determining how many steps you are making forward versus how many steps you're making back in your progress. So, if most of the time you are able to resist seeking reassurance, resist the compulsion, resist the analyzing, resist asking people or going to online sources, if you can resist that most of the time, then you are progressing pretty quickly and you will recover pretty quickly. If you are doing sometimes yes, sometimes no, like 50-50, I mean, right? Then you are standing on the same spot and I wouldn't even, I mean, it is kind of recovery in that you are learning how to handle it, but it's a very first stage of recovery because you're learning how to do it and you are getting knowledge which will help you in your recovery, but in terms of changing your brain, you are not really changing how your brain views the situation, because one day you say it's important, the next day you say it's unimportant. It's like plus one minus one. Your brain does it's like, what? You're confusing it further. So but if you say day after day, this is not important, this is not important, this is not important, your mind says, okay, so 10 times in a row, when faced with this same situation, say driving for example, right, the person says it's not important, must not be important, because every time they're doing the same thing, they're still fine, they're still alive, no need to protect them, I better move on. And that's how your brain moves on. The actual physicality of the brain, the connectors in the brain of connecting the situation to an action, to a thought, they shift how they're viewed, how your brain reacts when faced with that situation, with that stimuli. You know, it reacts differently than it used to because you taught it. So that's what we're doing here, is we're teaching the brain to handle a situation. Um, but if you're teaching it one day, one way another day, you're not really moving forward. So that's a huge factor. Also, how long have you had the thought? Um, and it's not. I find that, again, from my experience of talking to people, that a lot of the time the person will have OCD for years and they will recover quicker than a person who's had OCD for a few months. And the reason why that is, I think, is because the person who's had it for years already already experienced it for so long that they kind of understand the pattern a little bit better. They understand what triggers them. They understand that, okay, if I'm doing reassurance, I can see again and again and again I'm getting worse. So they have that experience and they're willing to take that plunge of refusing reassurance, because it's scary to refuse reassurance, because basically you think you're about basically to die, not really die, but something bad is about to happen and you're not running for cover. So a person who's had it for a while and has that experience of knowing that these thoughts are just coming one after another, um, will have an easier time with that than the person who's fresh and doesn't know how to handle it. You know what I mean? Because they haven't had the experience, and to them the thoughts are new and scary. But on the other side of it, the person who's new with it has not had the pattern that ingrained as the person who's had it for a long time. So if they are able to break through that wall of fear, and if they're able to just kind of like they're sick of it, like they don't know what's happening to them and they want to just go for it and get rid of it, if they're that determined, they will of course recover quicker, because on a physical level, the patterns are not that ingrained. But I find that a lot of the time for people who are new to OCD and haven't experienced it for a long time, it's difficult. I've seen both cases where a person will go through it and recover really fast, and a person who actually takes a long time, even though they've only had it for a few months, because they're just overwhelmed, you know. So that kind of gives you an indication. So if the person is, now let's talk about percentages and how that works out. And again, I'm not pulling these numbers out of the air. It's what I see when I talk to clients. So a person who does 50-50, 50 times they do reassurance, 50 times they don't do reassurance, 50% of the time, they will not recover doing that. They will recover eventually, because eventually they'll go to 60% and 70% and they will recover. But 50-50, they're not recovering. They're learning, but they're not recovering. If they do 60 is like right next to 50, right? So it's like, can't talk really about it. It's very similar. But say if they do 75% of the time, 75% of the time they're doing the right thing, 25% they're doing the wrong thing. So in that case, I would say it takes maybe about 4 to 6 months to recover. You need to get to an 80 or 90% to really recover in like 2-3 months. And if you do that right away, it's kind of like, if you don't do it, you're prolonging your own suffering. And I'm not talking about it even just from the client's experience with this. I'm saying from my own experience, because I've had OCD like that too, right? And my case was not different. I'm not any kind of like different person than anybody else, in sense that when I was getting over OCD, I did reassurance, then I didn't do reassurance, then I did reassurance, then I didn't do reassurance. So everybody's in the same boat with this, but you just really have to pull back and stop yourself from seeking that reassurance. Because if you don't seek reassurance 90% of the time, and then there will be those days where we fail, it does happen, right? So if you 90% of the time don't seek reassurance, you will recover very quickly, like 3 months, but you have to be very focused. So that's kind of the breakdown of what makes up the recovery from OCD. And everybody is different, and you kind of have to look at it as a race. You're going from point A to point B. It doesn't matter if you go from point A to point B. Well, it matters in terms of suffering, but it doesn't matter in terms of, you will still end up at point B. Some people go faster in the race, some people go slower in the race. Everybody's going to cross that finish line. So it's about keeping going, because if you keeping going, even if you are at 60% reassurance, or 60% not seeking reassurance, 40% seeking reassurance. No, wait. Yeah. Right? So you're doing a little bit better than 50. So that's all right. That's good enough already, And well, it's not really good enough, but it's okay. Let's put it that way. You're doing the best you can. And that's the thing, is like trying to do the best you can. You will still, at 60%, you will still get there. You'll get there a lot slower. It might take, I don't know, close to a year, over 6 months, definitely, I would say, if you keep at that 60%. But here's another thing too, is that usually what happens is a person will go to 50%, then they feel, oh, okay, whenever I don't seek reassurance, nothing really happens. There's no scary situation, even though it felt scary. Let me try more. And then they go to 60%, then they go to 70%. So you do get better as you get more experience of not seeking reassurance, and seeing that it doesn't really change anything, and your anxiety does go away, and learning that pattern of behavior. So I've never seen the person who starts out at 60% or 50% keep going through the whole thing, and finish at 60%. Because you just get better. That's how it works. The more confident you get, the better you get, the closer you get to the recovery, the least reassurance you seek, right? Because you can't both seek reassurance and recover, right? So the closer you get, the less you seek, the more confident you feel, the less anxiety you feel, the better it gets. So anyway, I hope this clears it up for you. If you guys have any questions, you know where to find me. You can email me at info@youhaveocd.com, or you can visit youhaveocd.com. There's a recovery program there with me. There's also ebooks for sale about OCD and different types of OCD, as well as a lot of free resources as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.